love saying nice and good and praising things of officials. And the board of Northwest Utility District that serves Soddy Daisy has for months now been deserving of opprobrium of approval, and that is for its vote in July last year to eliminate fluoride from the district that serves 8,000 customers. And the board was encouraged by David Collett, a relatively new general manager at Northwest Utility District. And David's position was, well, if we have fluoride, which is hydrofluorosilicic acid, in our system, we are damaging our pipes, we are damaging our fixtures, and this is a cost that we don't have to bear. And we're going to hear now from David Collett, the general manager, about that process, what happened. And we have in mind, as we hear about Soddy Daisy, the Soddy Daisy area, we have in mind the doings in Hickson, which has service from the Hickson Utility District, which in November faced a firestorm of opposition to fluoride. But the board ended up standing pat, not even taking a vote to maintain the status quo for about, more than 20,000 customers north of the river here in Chattanooga. Well, David, you're the general manager. You're 37 years old. You and your wife, Holly, have 2 children. She's a school teacher. And you've been serving the board at Northwest Utility District for, I'd say, just under a year. Is that about right?
Just over a year.
Just over a year and a half.
Sir.
Okay. Well, tell us about your arrival at that district and what you saw as a reform and an improvement.
Well, when I first came to Northwest Utility District and had the opportunity to serve the customers in the Falling Water, Sale Creek, Soddy Daisy, and Mowbray Mountain areas, and we go into a little bit of Bledsoe and Sequatchie County as well, we had a lot of improvements to make on our infrastructure side, replacing water lines, a lot of undersized and overaged pipes. In addition to that, we were kind of in the throes of designing a new water treatment plant in Soddy Daisy. And when we started that design process, we started looking at costs, and we looked at the footprint and the layout and everything. And out of those things, we made a list of what do we want at this plant, what do we not want at this plant. And out of that, fluoride was one of those items that came from that discussion. And we knew that, the issue with adding hydrofluorosilicic acid to the water is an issue that, folks are, passionate about on both sides. And then some people don't express an opinion on it. But we got into that discussion a little bit with our commissioners, and I worked with our water treatment plant manager, and we felt like it was in the best interest to bring that forth to the commissioners so that they could look at it and see the pros and cons and everything. And so we did that at one of our regularly scheduled board meetings that are open to the general public, and the commissioners discussed it, and they said, yes, we'd like to move forward with learning more about this and possibly ceasing water fluoridation in our system.
Well, how is it that fluoride works against pipes and fittings? What is it? How is it an acid? Tell a little bit about that.
Hydrofluorosilicic acid. There's many forms. There's a powder form. There's there's the liquid form, and the liquid form is what we add, or what we were adding to the water. Now, fluoride does occur naturally already in the water. It becomes a little more present when you have more rainfall, and there's a lot of runoff that comes into the water. And so what we did was we would supplement that with hydrofluorosilicic acid to get to about a 0.7 parts per million, which is what the state, TDEC and EPA, they essentially, they don't require us to fluoridate the water, but they say if you're going to, this is the recommendation is that you put in 0.7 parts per million. So even without us adding hydrofluorosilicic acid, there is still a natural level of fluoride in the water.
And what would that level be without your addition?
Right now, for our water source, it's about a 0.2. So we essentially went from a 0.7 to a 0.2.
When the board voted to end it, and it was reported in the Times Free Press that the next day you stopped the drip.
That's correct. We did. We We continued to finish out the month just so our paperwork was clean and our reporting to the state was clean. But at the end of that month was when we ceased water fluoridation. Um, and really, after that vote was made, we probably had maybe 2 or 3 phone calls or comments for fluoride, and then probably about 2 or 3 that favored the board's decision on that. So it was, and it's been pretty quiet since then.
All right. So the point that my listener needs to consider, David Collett, the manager of Northwest Utility District, is that fluoridation is voluntary in Tennessee. There's no statutory requirement to do it.
That's correct. Tennessee is a state that the state allows the utilities to make that decision. And in Tennessee, I believe there's just over 400 water utility districts, and probably about half of them will add fluoride, supplement the water with fluoride, and the other half don't. And the number that have ceased water fluoridation has been increasing over the past 5 or 6 years.
If my listener has read Nooganomics.com or followed our Nooga radio platform, you're aware that the line of argument that David Collett used with the board was not in the highly disputed area over whether fluoride or hydrofluorosilicic acid is a neurological danger, but rather on the cost. And in those 2 or 3 months prior to the vote, your discussion was on what you had a dollar figure that you said is the cost. Talk a little bit about that approach to the board.
Sure. As you had mentioned, hydrofluorosilicic is an acid, and it is corrosive, and it eats away at metal parts and fittings and stuff. And then it's obviously something that you have to be prepared to handle and deal with as a water treatment plant operator. The cost that we were looking at was around $20,000 a year, is what Northwest Utility District was paying out for damages, repairs, and then the chemical itself. So that was one of the aspects that we, gave consideration to when we were looking at, ceasing water fluoridation.
I think your presentation and the arguments that I made as a journalist covering that issue was to suggest that removing fluoride was the cautious and conservative thing to do, and to keep it, for the board to keep it, was something that was risky and maybe legally dangerous. How might fluoridation be a legal danger to a utility such as Northwest Utility District, David?
Well, obviously, our mission, we're charged is with delivering safe, reliable drinking water. And so anytime you make changes to the quality or quantity of water, you have to take into consideration your customer base and everything. And so the state does require a utility that if you're looking at ceasing water fluoridation, you have to notify all of your customers, through a letter. And so that was one thing that we really tried to plan for, is that we wanted to carefully prepare our letter to notify our customer base. And we knew that letter would get out to folks outside of our customer base. But again, we were trying to be very transparent. Our board was very conservative in their decision, and I believe that they really did due diligence in researching all the issues and stuff. A lot of the information that they read was letters, was research articles through the CDC, the ADA, Food and Drug.
What is ADA?
That's the American Dental Association. And then I personally went to meet with several of the local dentists in the area to talk about our decision and more or less why we were, looking at this.
Was that prior to the vote, David?
That was prior to the vote, yes. And our main thing is that we didn't want to, we wanted to be very open about what we were doing and wanted to be very transparent about it. Our commissioners, they researched the information on their own. And then we also had a lot of information from our customer base that was provided, and numerous meetings. We put all that information together in probably a phone book size binder, and they had over 1,000 pages of documents from doctors, from lawyers, from the state, from medical examiner's office, and all around, and more importantly from our customer base, because that's essentially who we listen to and who we are charged with serving. And so there was a lot of outside influence and outside opinions, but our customer base again is who we're kind of charged with serving.
Well, about the customer base, what did you hear from common people about fluoridation when it came up? There were 2 meetings about this. There was quite a bit of publicity. Mainly, I would say, from what I can gather from Nooga Radio and Nooganomics.com. What did the customers, aside from the media types who were writing about this, what did they say? What suggestions did you have from common bill payers?
Sure. Well, from our customer base, like we'd mentioned before, we probably have about 8,000 customers in our service area. And when we sent the letter out to all 8,000 customers, the response that we received back was probably less than 3% of our customer base that, commented on it. And out of that 3%, the majority of them said that we were, they essentially were glad that the board was considering ceasing water fluoridation. And so that essentially, I think, helped guide our commissioners somewhat, is that they felt like, the folks that we are responsible and responsive to, that, their opinion on it. And keep in mind, it was less than 3%, so that's a pretty small number out of 8,000 customers. But those folks, their voices did carry, and they were at the meeting. And like you mentioned, we did have 2 meetings. The first meeting, I believe our commissioners were prepared to make a decision, but there was a pretty full crowd. There were probably about 35 people in attendance at that board meeting. There were quite a few folks from the dental community that were there that weren't necessarily of representative of our service district, and that's fine. We welcome them, and we allowed them to express their concerns and everything. But I think that our commissioners, and I'm glad they did this, but they decided to essentially hold off on the vote and reschedule the vote, and essentially just try to digest the information, the comments that they had heard from both sides of the view. And I think that was the right thing to do at the time, and not make a decision in haste because they felt pressure from one group or the other.
You mentioned that in the phone book size sheaf of a folder that became the dossier about the question whether or not to eliminate fluoride, you had letters from lawyers. What is the legal argument that most impressed the board of Northwest Utility District as far as liability goes for neurological damage to customers? What about future liability and future unknowns? How did that weigh in?
Well, some of the information that was provided to us through legal counsels from other areas in Tennessee had essentially indicated or alluded to the fact that you're adding something to the water that is not required by the state or mandated. And by doing that, you are making a choice to do that, and then you don't really know how much each individual is getting from that, the dosage on that. Now, we do understand that the TDEC and EPA, they essentially provide that optimal level of 0.7 parts per million, but they have essentially reduced that level over the past few years, citing the reason being is that they recognize individuals are obtaining fluoride through other means, through bread, milk, and other foods and different things like that fluoride is, available. And then there's other alternatives to it with, various toothpaste, mouthwashes, and things like that. So they even recognize that there are more alternatives to obtaining fluoride.
So if there are alternative ways of obtaining fluoride, which is a medical solution, then why expose yourself to liability to have a mass medication of all the customers of that district?
Right. And so one of our commissioners felt pretty strongly that we shouldn't really be in that business of dosing the water if we don't know how much a small child is getting versus an adult, and that's really not our area of expertise. And they felt like it potentially could be a liability on down the road.
When representatives of the Tooth Tribe, the Tooth Doctor Tribe, spoke in Hickson, one of the doctors with an office here in Hickson said, well, if we don't have fluoride in the water, we encumber and bother parents who want to have fluoride for their children. They have to go out of their way. They have to go to a Walgreens or a CVS and buy fluoridated toothpaste, or they have to buy fluoride tablets for their children. And this is an inconvenience we just can't imagine you and Hickson Utility District bothering these customers with. So we favor mass fluoridation in Hickson, and that was one of the I'd say kind of a ludicrous argument for fluoride in Hickson. But now when you were stewarding this effort, David Collett, that was not an argument you were making. You were looking at this from a managerial, structural perspective. So you were kind of on safe ground in a way, right?
We were, yeah. And that was one of the things that throughout this process, we didn't really want to get bogged down into the debate, because that debate, like you mentioned, I mean, it can go on for a long time, and people are passionate about the issue of the pros and cons with water fluoridation. And so we wanted to look at, okay, how is it affecting us and our operations, the costs of it, what potential is it for our plant operators as far as handling it and dealing with it on a day-to-day basis, and then what, more importantly, do our customers say? How do our customers feel about it? Not so much how much the outside influence is, or the dental community outside our area, or folks outside our area, but what are our customers saying? And again, that response was probably less than 3%. And out of that 3%, the majority of them felt like the board was doing the right thing.
Well, in my analysis, David, the Northwest Utility District Board did not believe the dental profession, which has a kind of distorted view of the human body. Its view is that a human being, our listener, is 95% mouth. He's all mouth, and the head and the limbs and the trunk and the legs are a tiny, tiny little part of this body. And we're gonna have our whole focus on this mouth and the teeth and the gums, and to heck with the rest of the body. But the mouth area is 3 or 4% of the human physiognomy, and not more. And so there needs to be a sense of proportionality. And it seems to me that the board voted conservatively, cautiously, and with a right scale. It scaled the human body correctly to see that the mouth is just one small part of it. And we, as a utility providing potable water, we're not going to make a decision which pretends that the mouth is the whole thing. Because there are possible side effects for fluoride, and we don't want to be imposing those on people not knowing. We just want to be very cautious and very careful. David Collett.
That's correct. Yeah, and again, I feel like our board, they made a step in the right direction. I do feel like their decision was not made in haste, in that it was planned to be done at one meeting, and they heard the concerns and comments, and then they postponed the vote to another meeting. And we were very open about it, and we wanted public's feedback and comments on it and everything, and didn't want to make a decision based off of just one aspect of it. So I really feel like they looked at all the aspects. We tried to be very accommodating to our customer base. So we tried to make a lot of consolations, and we looked at even having the meeting at local churches. Churches had provided some space for us because we were anticipating larger crowds and everything, but we wanted to be consistent. We wanted to keep our board meeting at that location, and just really allow people to voice their concerns. And
so what the board did, David Collett of Northwest Utility District, was I would say a very good thing, and that was respect the customer. If the customer has a child with a medical need or a weakness or a problem, let that mom or dad serve that child by getting medication or special toothpaste. And we're not going to put into our water supply anymore a material which, if you read the back of the small print on your toothpaste tube, says, do not consume. If you consume, immediately call for medical help, because it is a poison. It is dangerous to consume toothpaste. So don't do it. And we're going to understand that warning on the back of the toothpaste tube and not put that material, short name fluoride, in our water. It's going to be clean water. It's going to be pure water, and everybody's going to be happy with it.
That's correct. That was obviously one of the concerns from the commissioners is with ingesting water. They read a lot of information from the CDC and the ADA that noted that fluoride was, good for topical application. But then there were some counter arguments to the systemic application of it and ingesting it. And that was some questions, concerns that they had. And then there were even some letters provided from the dental community that, essentially said that they wouldn't come out publicly and support water fluoridation, but they didn't see any major harm by not having fluoride in the water.
David Collett, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
David Collett is the general manager of Northwest Utility District, which took a bold and courageous step in July to eliminate fluoride from the water. And by our analysis, it was a very cautious and conservative step. It was cautious and conservative to get fluoride, hydrofluorosilicic acid out of the water and let parents and others who have small children decide on their own how and whether to use fluoride for topical care of children's teeth. This is David Tulis, and we are here at Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and FM 92.7.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader. Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
3, 2, 1.
Chattanooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM's news now.
Parents of students in McMinn County have been notified that inappropriate touching may have been going on during a field trip to Space Camp in Huntsville, Alabama. Faculty says the principal has been sent down to investigate, and the police have been notified in Huntsville. The families have opted to keep the alleged victims at Space Camp, and the alleged perpetrator has been expelled pending an investigation. All of the individuals involved are students. Gravel being kicked up by construction near the Signal Mountain Boulevard exit on US 27 has been causing some pretty serious problems for windshields of drivers. Reports of chipped windshields and cracked paint have been spreading across the area. An inmate in the Hamilton County Jail has died after what they're calling a medical emergency. He was discovered and rushed to the hospital. Jeffrey Simmons, who's 44, pronounced dead at the hospital. He was in jail on a charge of domestic assault. The sheriff's office investigating his death. Russell Stroud, Nooga Radio News, now.
In-depth traffic, news, and information. Mornings on Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
Expect a very mild start to your Friday with lots of clouds, as we'll see scattered showers and a few thunderstorms march in from the west. They could be locally strong, highs into the mid and upper 70s tonight. Lingering showers will diminish after midnight, lows upper 50s, with drier and pleasant weather for the weekend. Get to JCPenney's biggest sale of the season, just in time for Mother's Day. Now through Sunday, get up to 50% off throughout the store. That's getting your pennies worth now at your local JCPenney. And I'm Swarsheen Twall, Chief Meteorologist Patrick Ford. On Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM knows your opinion is important. So call 800-8949. Agree or disagree? Call 423-800-8949. 800-8949. Nooga Radio, AM 1240, 92.7 FM, and 95.3 HD4. News, talk, sports. Nooga Radio.
When my brother and I opened the first Jets Pizza, we believed if we made the best pizza, customers would find us. So we made fresh dough each day, used fresh toppings, and premium mozzarella cheese. 300 plus stores later, we still do.
Try Jet's famous 8-corner pizza with premium mozzarella cheese and one topping, now just $11.99 for a limited time only. Jet's Pizza, the best pizza in town. 3600 Hickson Pike.
Life is short. Eat better pizza.
Let's get Jets.
Choose Exit Realty Scenic City. Need to sell your house? Want to buy another house? Choose Exit Realty Scenic City. Our goals are simple. If you're selling, we get you the best price possible in the quickest amount of time with the least amount of hassle. Our agents are professional.
I've got a $10 bill for you at the best paint store in Chattanooga. David here. Big savings in exterior stains. Chattanooga Paint and Decorating. More than a paint store. Bring up $100 on your next upgrade. Plunk down just $90. Save on all outdoor stains in stock at Chattanooga Paint and Decorating. Prolix Sickens. Benjamin Moore, Flood, Sanson, Richards. 10% off through May 13th. Jim and his team are here to help and advise and to help you hold on to your money. 5529 Hickson Pike. Chattanooga Paint and Decorating. ChattanoogaPaint.com.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader. Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM. Now, the smartest guy with a bow tie in Chattanooga, Tennessee, David Tulis.
The Hamilton County concurrent grand jury report described this morning in Chattanooga.com has a lone man standing in front of a Tiananmen Square tank. A lone man standing in front of a column of armored vehicles, as it were, approaching, making way toward the protesters, right? The Democrats, the people yearning for freedom, if you will, in China back when that great uproar occurred. The man with his hand on briefcase on one side and his jacket on the other, standing in front of a T-54 Russian-made tank with a 100 millimeter cannon, leading a column, and there he stands, and the tank stops. Well, there's a man described, an unknown man, a local economy hero, you might say a miracle worker, who has done the same thing, and he's mentioned without being named in the grand jury report. This report is in Chattanooga.com this morning, and I urge you to take a look at it if you have a few minutes. It's in he's mentioned in a comment that describes the process of saying no, the process of standing in front of the armored column with your hand on your briefcase and the other and your jacket thrown over your other arm. You are standing there not in a military martial position. You're not in a fighting position. You're just standing there, and you are using your body, as it were, to stop the coming massacre, the coming raid on the protesters there in Tiananmen Square. An unnamed person, we don't even know that it's a man, but because you, my listener, are the man who matters, we're just going to assume that it is. The fact that there's one person who gains a secret notoriety, a secret fame, if you will, in this report is suggestive of something that a man would do. Though there no doubt there are women who would do what this gentleman did. That is to say, to stand firm and to not give in. Now, what we have in view here is a reform. It is called judicial reform, and I have already I've mentioned this at least once to you, and I suggest that the Christian church could be involved in bringing more such men to stand in front of armored columns. The column in this case is the judicial industrial complex and the operation of courts. The armor plate and the weaponry is exercised and wielded by whom? Well, by sheriff's deputies and police department officers in jurisdictions all across the state. And here in Chattanooga, we have Chattanooga, Red Bank, we have Saudi Daisy, East Ridge, and these departments are military organizations that serve the mayor. Well, in Red Bank, they serve the general manager, but the city manager. So it's not quite clear exactly whom. I haven't checked. I have not read the charter, as news director Russell Strauss suggested I do yesterday. Read the charter to see the line of authority there in Red Bank. But the mayor may not have direct control over the Red Bank chief of police. But generally, though, chiefs of police serve the executive branch. They execute policy, they execute ordinances, and they serve the executive will. Now, in these cities, we have a machinery that's been in operation for decades. It has been going for decades, and it's called law enforcement. Law enforcement is, I would say, violative of the spirit of local economy and the free market. And that is because it is an industry, right? It is an industry serving another industry, that being the court system and all the hangers-on. It's not quite as large as the state's biggest state cartel, that being public education. But it is nonetheless a very large one, and it has to take the off-sloughing, if you will, from the court system. It has the Department of Corrections, and it has around the state in 95 counties jails that take prisoners up to 364 days a year if they're misdemeanants. They are, they're bad guys on a small scale. They stay in the jail, and if they're bad guys on a large scale, important bad guys, they go to the penitentiary in direct state jurisdiction run by that department. Often through profit-seeking profit-seeking businesses. Now, the man standing in front of the tank is, as I say, he's not named, and he's introduced following a kind of bold discussion by the grand jury, the concurrent grand jury, which gives an analysis of the court system. And the headline, just to get a sense of the larger goal of this report, says that law needs to be changed so grand juries deal with serious felony cases. Now, that really is the main point of that report. There's some other details that are not really as significant. But if grand juries only deal with serious felony cases, what about all the other cases? This report exposes a raw nerve, the one that I have been standing on. and the raw nerve is, why do we have law enforcement if we're a free people? Why do we have law enforcement if we are a free state? What we have really is commercial government, and we've had it for at least since 1937, when the Commercial Driver's License Act went into effect, and that greatly enlarged the state's control over private life through a pretended regulation of private movement by cars and trucks through commerce, making everybody effectively enter commerce so that they might be subject to regulation in the use of their property, right? Movement is a property right. And the state claims control of it. Well, the grand jury in its comment says that it has respect for the wisdom of our forefathers who developed the common law, which prevails. But they say that there are faults in the system. And they say, we all appreciate that an accused person can use the system to their advantage to buy time, delaying hearings, trials, and procedural motions. Of course, those are just the exercises of your rights, right? Unfortunately, these actions ripple down to the grand jury as well as across the system in general, often at great expense to the taxpayer. So now, taking the pro-taxpayer perspective, the concurrent grand jury report says that the fact that people resist the state and that they say no to the state and they demand their rights, well, that's a problem. That is kind of a problem. This report does not take the citizen's perspective, but I'm afraid to say takes on perhaps too much of the state. It is a pro-government, pro-state perspective. Now, I don't use the word pro-government in a negative way. We are the biggest pro-government station and media platform in the state. We here at Nooga Radio and Nooganomics.com, we are pro-government to the core. And the primary government of which we are pro, right, that we support, is self-government. If we have self-government, we, under God, we, in the end, don't need the state. We don't need judges, courts. We don't need regulators. We don't even need governors if we govern ourselves under God and in light of his laws. So the grand jury report sort of takes a negative view of people asserting their rights. You have, just to clarify, you, my listener, have a right to a grand jury review of charges filed against you by the accuser, right? Just as Satan in the scriptures, the accuser, in our time of positivist government, statutory government, the state is always the accuser. The state is always the offended party in everything. Even in a murder, the victim and the survivors are not the offended party, but the state is. So that's why the case is styled State versus Jones and what have you. But small cases, the grand jury says, maybe shouldn't come before us directly. Maybe we can find a way of short-circuiting the personal testimony required, the standard that causes a lot of trouble to the law enforcement community, as it is known. An example was, here it is. Now, an example was a case in which a defendant obviously refused to plead guilty to a charge in Sessions Court for whatever reason. Notice they're mystified by the fact that someone would plead not guilty. In our current system, everybody pleads guilty. More than 90% of cases are pled into the record, and most of those cases are by poor and ignorant people. Most of them are from probably about half, maybe a third, are from minorities, disproportionately represented in the docket, and or whatever reason. And by rule, the case was bound over to the grand jury. Now here, the concurrent grand jury is kind of worried about the work of the main grand jury. That a small case, right? The man should have pleaded guilty, right? The point is, Sessions Court and city courts are enable the police state. Without the use of these courts, I just want to suggest here, without the use of these courts, we would not have a police state. We simply couldn't have it. It could not function if every charge that was filed had to be by arrest, booking, jailing, bonding, and indictment. That's how the courts should operate, right? There should not be thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of cases across the state that are handled informally, and almost all of them pled to. This required, the grand jury says, this required the arresting officer, in this case, a Tennessee Highway Patrol officer, to testify before the grand jury. The charge, violation of the seatbelt law. Okay, so you have a minor case, violation of a seatbelt law, and a THP officer had to testify before the grand jury. Very inconvenient, very, very costly. It cost the taxpayers money to have the officer come all the way to Chattanooga and to testify. The jury understands that the rules and processes provide for this action. It says, and that is the simple beauty of American justice. However, the grand jury also feels, all right, so this is the beauty of the American system, is that if you're accused, your accuser has to make an accusation against you to indict you, right? There has to be a sworn testimony to indict you, the victim of the system, right? You, the bad guy, you, the criminal, right? The offender. There has to be inconvenience to the state. Of course, the grand jury's effort here is to reduce the inconvenience to the state, and as we'll see. However, the grand jury also feels that there needs to be some common sense applied to the burgeoning load of cases that come before the grand jury. Perhaps it is time for an alternative. Now, here's the alternative. Again, another way of relieving pressure so that law enforcement can continue its merry way, continue its very high caseload of charges from commercial government against the people here in Hamilton County and in counties all across the state. And the concurrent grand jury proposes a virtual grand jury under which certain offenses, especially, it says minor misdemeanors, do not need to be physically heard before the jury, but rather voted on discreetly using some secure method. In other words, by Skype, okay? By Skype, we can hear these accusations. The officers don't have to come in. They can give testimony from their car, right? They can just say, hey, this guy, you, my listener, right? Insert your name there. This man didn't have a seatbelt on, and I'm in my car. I'm on patrol. I'm out on radar right now, and I'm just going to have a little Skype interview, and I'm going to swear. I'll hold my hand up before the camera and swear, yes, this man, I caught this man without a seatbelt on. He was operating a car in commerce, and so that's a crime, and we need to punish him for that offense against the state. The peace and dignity of the state require it, right? That's what the accusers do. The officers who represent the state's interest. And the grand jury goes on to say, in the example cited, now this is the heavy lifting that a single no imposes upon the system. Okay, this is the meat here, the next sentence. I'm reading this, by the way, from Chattanooga.com, which published the whole concurrent grand jury report. In total, more than 17 persons were involved in the testimony directly, and many more indirectly. So one man saying no, standing before the Tiananmen Square column of T-54 tanks. One man required 17 persons to be involved in testimony directly, and many more indirectly. This was an expensive proposition, the concurrent grand jurors declare. The grand jury believes there are cases that could easily be presented to a virtual grand jury without impacting the veracity or the institution that is the American criminal justice system. Many states in the United States reserve the use of grand juries only for investigations or testimony of serious felony offenses. Now, in other words, we have the grand jury for serious cases only. Well, isn't that the way it's supposed to be to begin with? The change in policing, the change in the modern state has come when the accuser no longer has to trouble the accused by arresting him, taking him to the jail, booking him, fingerprinting him, citing him, getting a judge to post a bond on him, and then having the man go before the grand jury to be indicted. Right? That system doesn't have to happen anymore. Why? Well, because everybody, the judges, the lawyers, the bar, and apparently everyone, police officials, sheriff's deputies, sheriff's officers, all agree that we can cite the person. It's a convenience, right? Now the convenience, because it's a convenience, I know this is complicated, okay? I understand that, but just bear with me, okay? This is David Tulis, and I'm trying to get to the nub of the reform, a penal reform, a judicial reform. Because the system requires an indictment, and requires booking and jailing for anybody accused of a crime. We can have a system whereby people who are accused don't have to actually be arrested, booked and bonded and indicted. We can have it so that they go to these inferior courts, namely sessions and city. And there we can get them into our system voluntarily. We can get them to plead guilty, right? Plead guilty. And that way we can have a large caseload and maintain a large caseload every day. Every day we can have this cattle call in these lower courts, and we can dispose of cases without actually having to try them. We don't have to try the law. We don't have to try the facts. We just get people to plead guilty. And guess how damaging that is to black people. Just think about it. Guess how damaging it is to common people who are white, to people who cannot afford a lawyer, who are Hispanic, right? People who are poor and ignorant, don't know their rights, don't know how to assert them because they went to public school, right? They don't know anything. They've been trained to submit. They've been trained to be compliant. They all plead guilty, and so that's a blot on their record. They can't get jobs. Their records will haunt them until they draw Social Security. And so we have a system where people are marked for life because they went through the inferior court, and they pleaded guilty to a theft or a traffic violation or a moving violation. Nothing serious. The grand jury says motor vehicle charges concerning light laws, failure to appear charges, simple DUIs, where a qualified blood alcohol report or substance analysis report meets state limit statutes, assault charges where there is clear medical evidence of injury, etc. The list could go on. In the end, a virtual grand jury using a portfolio of information about a case could operate effectively and could possibly clear more cases off the docket than a sitting grand jury. Now, this proposed reform goes simply in the wrong direction. It's going against local economy. It's going against the free market. A reform that would go in favor of local economy, in favor of the free market, and in favor of individual common people, innocent common people who've done no sin. Most of them haven't sinned on these points, right? They've just offended somebody. They've offended some holy law in the Tennessee Code, annotated. The reform would be going just the opposite way. Instead of making the system easier to bring people into, quote, justice, unquote, make it more difficult. And here's the reform. All right, you're not quite seeing what I'm saying. Well, let me just start from a different direction. Let me start from the direction of the church, okay? If Christian people in their churches said, if anybody we know or any member of our church is accused, we are going to help that person to say, no, I'm not going to plead guilty. I'm not going to sign the line to waive my hearing in this court. We're going to have that member of our church, with Christian encouragement, we're going to make him sign the line where it says, I'll demand a right to be indicted, right? I'm going to waive this court. I waive sessions court. I waive city court. Indict me. Come on, indict me. And what would happen if all these little cases, the petty cases that the concurrent grand jury wants to get rid of and wants to, move along, if they all demanded an indictment, the system would clog up. The system would stop. It would have to stop. Now, we have precedent for this theory, and it is from a Russian dissident named Bukovsky. And I've got some important announcements I want you to make note of here in just a minute. But here's what here's what he did in the 1970s. He arranged to have an assembly line of protests that the Soviet system, the Soviet bureaucracy, had to account for. In the old Soviet system, there were sort of show laws that were really meant for Western consumption to show what a liberal and democratic society the communist Soviet system was. And so these laws were all about due process. So if you filed a complaint, there were deadlines for complaints, and the complaints had to be passed from party to party in a certain protocol. And what Bukovsky did was create an assembly line process for protest. And he taught hundreds of inmates how to write protests, which were sent all around the Soviet Union to all kinds of people who were under a statutory obligation to answer. And there were 75,000 protests finally lodged, and the entire Soviet bureaucracy ground to a halt. And that was because people, you will just have to hear from Bukovsky what happened. Now, I'm not proposing that exactly, but what I'm suggesting is that if the Christian church would encourage men to stand firm and to say no and demand their rights, Well, everyone's case would have to go before the grand jury. The grand jury turns away many cases, and that is to say it issues a no true bill. Some cases, of course, it says, yes, there is enough evidence here for a trial. And so we indict this person, and we want that person to stand trial before our brothers in the petit jury. That is to say, the criminal, a criminal have a criminal trial. There, on those cases, there would be help too. But people shouldn't be as afraid as they are. People should not be as intimidated, and they should say no, and they should demand an indictment. If the Christians, let's say, if 6 black churches serving common people in Chattanooga said we're going to organize to say no and demand the right to a grand jury indictment, what would happen over time? Well, here's what would happen over time. Law enforcement would have to start getting serious and start prosecuting only people who really had done something wrong, right? Not these paper crime cases that would be just let go. We can stop law enforcement, or at least scale it back, if we just make the system work like it's supposed to. David Tulis.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader. Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
iBuyChattanoogaHouses.com, Chattanooga's premier house buyer. Do you have a house you need to sell fast? We are buying. Call us today. We are local folks. We will buy your house as is, no repairs needed. We will give you a cash offer and close on the day of your choice. Call us right now, 423-834-7321. Need to sell a house fast? We are buying. Are you experiencing one of these situations? Inherited a house you have no need for? Behind on your property taxes? Nightmare tenants making your life miserable? Too many repairs needed and don't have a desire to fix? Behind on payments and facing foreclosure? Recently divorced and need a way out of the house? Never really wanted to be a landlord and just want to cash out? Trying to relocate and need to sell your house? Do you need to sell a house fast? We are buying. No fees, no hassles, no repair costs. Close on the day of your choice. Our process is simple. Call us today. We inspect your property right away. We make you a fair cash offer. We close on the day of your choice. Call us today, 423-834-7321. Visit our website, iBuyChattanoogaHouses.com. Call us today, 423-834-7321. iBuyChattanoogaHouses.com.
Need windows? Hey folks, do you need new windows? Good news. Window Depot of Chattanooga has a great special going on right now. 10 high-quality, energy-efficient double-hung vinyl windows installed for only $29.90. That's right, 10 double-hung vinyl windows, only $2,990. And yes, they qualify for the TVA rebates. Call 894-0011. Window Depot of Chattanooga today, located at 5950 Shalford Road. Call 894-0011 today.
He stole out so much cash, such a huge mountain of cash, that he's become a national star. Rick Davis, you know the story. Cash, 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 and more cash. People can't believe it. They want to see it. And now Rick Davis has a new TV show. National TV, USA and Canada. He's got the gold and silver, diamonds and rings. You get dizzy just thinking about it. Rick's selling. Rick's buying. Cash, 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 and more cash. And now a mountain of cash catching the Hollywood spotlight. You know where it is. Brainerd Road. Rick Davis, Gold and Diamonds. Cash, 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 and national TV cash. That's really big. Everyone wants to see it. Money flying out the door. Rick Davis is America's jeweler. It's better than Hollywood. It's right here. Cash, 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 and more cash. Rick Davis, Gold and Diamonds. Brainerd Road.
You love me. You really love me.
Are you shovel ready to build a house, but you're not a builder? Are you shovel ready? Michael's Homes is ready to bulldoze its way to a solution for you. You have ideas on what you want in a house, but you're looking for someone to bring your ideas into a plan and turn your plan into a house. Michael's Homes, custom builder. Michael's Homes has lots available at a new subdivision, River Bay Estates, that's Harrison. Maybe River Watch in Saudi Daisy. Choices galore, lots, houses, beautiful homes all over Chattanooga. The Canyons, Hickson. Crystal Brook, Appleton. Drive in, take a look, consult with us. We build on your lot or ours. Homes-Chattanooga.com.
Call 423-413-9929.
It is Arizona
Derek Jones hard into the outside wall, and they are still 3 and 4 wide. It looks like we're racing at Talladega.
Caution flag is out. It looked like Denny Hamlin was trying to get by Ricky Stenhouse. Got into the back of Ricky at the line. Man, that's a close one. Matt Kenseth wins stage 1.
Green checkered flag is out, and Brad Keselowski has won stage 2.
Dale Earnhardt Jr. into the wall. That will bring out the caution. Caution waving once again. And again, it's Dale Earnhardt Jr. involved.
Oh, trouble. Ty Dillon has gotten turned to the inside of the racetrack, and Clint Boyer has just nailed him.
Matt Kenseth falling back. The field storming by. Something wrong. Now we see sparks from Kenseth's Toyota.
Larson chucks him off. Coming off turn number 2. Goes to tail. Now it's Logano to the high side in 3.
Joey Logano, a winner here at the Richmond International Raceway.
Here at Live on Chattanooga's official WBLZ HD4 Ooltewah, W224AZ Chattanooga, WSDT Saudi Daisy Chattanooga.
CBS News, I'm Frank Sedapani. Each day since the president fired his FBI director has produced a different explanation of why he did it, and today is no exception. CBS News correspondent Stephen Portnoy has the latest from the White House.
The president says what he calls this Russia thing was on his mind when he decided to fire James Comey, but he insists the director told him over dinner and twice on the phone that he was not personally under investigation. A source close to Comey says Mr. Trump at that dinner asked the FBI director to pledge to him his loyalty. Comey said he could only promise his honesty. The president tweets Comey had better hope there aren't any tapes of their conversations.
Attorney General Jeff Sessions is directing federal prosecutors to file the most serious charges in most of the cases they handle. CBS News senior legal analyst Andrew Cohen.
The vast majority of criminal cases and sentences come from state prosecutions, so this isn't going to dramatically change the landscape of mass incarceration in America. But it's designed to send more people to prison for longer stretches, even for nonviolent drug crimes, which is an issue at the core of the debate over criminal justice reform in America.
North of Houston, a house fire on fire collapsed, killing 3 children and critically burning another child and 2 adults. Elijah Easley is the family's minister.
You do not find them any better. They have been a staple here in the community of Tamron for many years. They have been a staple in the Church of God in Christ for many years.
The youngest child who died was 6, the oldest 13. A Florida woman who lost her legs in a traffic accident was stunned when the hospital that treated her took legal action. CBS's Peter King has that.
The woman was hospitalized in Fort Myers after she tried to help a stranded driver. A third vehicle pinned her against her car. She didn't have insurance, and within 3 days, Lee Memorial Hospital filed a $60,000 lien and then a $151,000 lien against her. The woman's father calls that heinous, but a hospital spokeswoman tells the Fort Myers News Press it's standard, and it helps them collect any insurance payouts. She says it doesn't affect a patient's property. Peter King, CBS News, Orlando.
Great white sharks in search of food have become a common sight off the coast of Southern California. A man in Long Beach says he'll pay attention to warnings to stay out of the water.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a common sense thing here. So, you get bit by a shark out here, you're not coming back.
Towns across the plains are cleaning up after storms that fueled damaging tornadoes. The house Chuck Toll owns in Edgewood, Texas, could use a few repairs.
Got up, looked out the window, and trees were shaking back and forth. It was very loud, very loud. It sounded like everyone describes like a freight train.
A lightning strike in Beach City, Texas, ignited tanks storing crude oil. Officials told dozens of families to evacuate nearby homes. At last report, the fire was under control but not out. The government says retail sales were up in April after a sluggish couple of months in February and March. In early Wall Street trading, the Dow Industrials are down 27 points. This is CBS News.
Sign Now by Barracuda Networks is the next generation in e-signature solutions, accelerating business transactions for more than 4 million people and counting. Sign Now is priced at a fraction of the cost of comparable solutions, offers superior ease of use, yet includes all the enterprise-class security and functionality your business will ever need to safely go paperless. Sign Now is pre-integrated with Salesforce, Office 365, and Google Apps, and you can even integrate Sign Now with your own app through its API. Visit signnow.com and enter promo code RADIO to start your free trial.
Let me ask you a question. Can you keep your 401k or IRA safe from the death of the dollar and from the possible new Cold War with Russia? We are Advantage Gold, the #1 rated gold IRA company in America by TrustLink. Over 50,000 people have requested our Gold IRA investment guide to learn how to protect their retirement savings. Find out how quick and easy it can be to convert your retirement fund to gold. Just call 800-900-8000 right now. That's 800-900-8000. Call 800-900-8000.
Avocado lovers should know about a medical condition that could affect them. CBS News correspondent Jim Hannity has the story.
It's become an international health concern. Avocado hand. We're talking about the injuries suffered by people who slice open avocados and into their hand. And yes, it happens a lot. So often that doctors from the U.S. and the U.K. are calling for public information campaigns to warn of the potential threat of cutting open avocados. One doctor even came up with a design, a cartoon picture of an avocado with a knife and a big red cross going through it. Jim Hannity, CBS News.
Fiat Chrysler is recalling 1 million Ram pickup trucks. A computer software problem could prevent side airbags and seat belts from deploying in a rollover. The company says it's aware of 1 death and 2 injuries that may be related to the defect. Technicians will reprogram the software in affected vehicles free of charge. Frank Sedapani, CBS News.
Attention men, if you have
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader. Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
3, 2, 1.
Chattanooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM's news now.
Parents of students in McMinn County have been notified that inappropriate touching may have been going on during a field trip to Space Camp in Huntsville, Alabama. Faculty says the principal has been sent down to investigate, and the police have been notified in Huntsville. The families have opted to keep the alleged victims at Space Camp, and the alleged perpetrator has been expelled pending an investigation. All of the individuals involved are students. Gravel being kicked up by construction near the Signal Mountain Boulevard exit on US 27 has been causing some pretty serious problems for windshields of drivers. Reports of chipped windshields and cracked paint have been spreading across the area. An inmate in the Hamilton County Jail has died after what they're calling a medical emergency. He was discovered and rushed to the hospital. Jeffrey Simmons, who's 44, pronounced dead at the hospital. He was in jail on a charge of domestic assault. The sheriff's office investigating his death. Russell Stroud, Nooga Radio News, now.
In-depth traffic, news, and information. Mornings on Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
Expect a very mild start to your Friday with lots of clouds as we'll see scattered showers and a few thunderstorms march in from the west. They could be locally strong, highs into the mid and upper 70s tonight. Lingering showers will diminish after midnight, lows upper 50s with drier and pleasant weather for the weekend. Get to JCPenney's biggest sale of the season, just in time for Mother's Day. Now through Sunday, get up to 50% off throughout the store. That's getting your pennies worth now at your local JCPenney. And I'm Smorgine 12, Chief Meteorologist Patrick Hall. On Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
Nooga Radio, AM 1240, 92.7 FM. Now, the smartest guy with a bow tie in Chattanooga, Tennessee, David Tulis.
If you love local economy and free markets like I do, you are going to start seeing solutions to problems that can't be fixed by commissions or legislatures or congressmen. And the solutions come from individual people like you. The requirement, if there is one, is that you work in league with other people like you individuals and pursue remedies one person at a time. Now, think just for a second about the problem of the poor. Well, we can complain all we want about Congress. We can rightly say, well, Congress is subsidizing poverty with its Great Society programs and paying people to be out of work and the like. We don't have to worry about charity because we're coercively required to pay for it through federal taxation, which we voluntarily enter into by signing away our rights. And that system takes care of the poor. So, you know, I'm fatigued about caring for the poor. I'm exhausted. I'm drained. I'm not going to care about them. But if we really have a genuine love for God, which some of us do, then we can see that there are things we can do in the way of welfare reform that are personal, and that would be caring for a single person who is needy. Right, just having a connection with one individual soul whom God in his providence has put in our path. And that person we start caring about. And we're not just paying that person's bills or anything. We're maybe doing some of that, but we're exercising grace and charity. Maybe we know things. Maybe we have knowledge of how systems work, and we help some person get where I, as a deacon, I once helped a woman in our church get unemployment benefits. I had to sort of sue on her behalf to get these benefits, which she was due under statute. I mean, we're against state welfare, but here the deacon, the Christian deacon, was having to manage a sort of an administrative claim on behalf of a church member who was fired unjustly, and we did get a remedy for her. So that's what Christianity does. It cares about the individual and lays and works within the context in which these people find themselves. Now, what about abuse by the state against the poor? What about abuse by police departments, by sheriff's departments around the country against people who are ill-equipped to represent themselves, ill-equipped to know what to do, don't have no advice, and they may have some pro bono help from the public defender's office. But that the public defender's office is in many ways, one here in Hamilton County run by Steve Smith. It's just another arm of the state, and it makes the process run smoothly, and it does not help arrive at justice, and it does not help put laws to the test. Laws need to be tested by being tried, right? Tried and appealed. There's hardly any appellate rulings on, say, disorderly conduct, which is a corrupt statute in Tennessee, that has 5 main provisions, and at least 2 of them are unconstitutionally vague. But they've never been tried, right? No one bothers to try cases and appeal these miserable provisions out of the law by a high court ruling. My goal here is to suggest ways we can bring about reform, man by man, person by person, and just offering encouraging words. As I had a couple of encouraging words for Hanson Melvin, the defendant he was indicted, and whose case was summarily dismissed by a criminal court when it was clear that there was perjury, there was lying, there was a miscreancy on the part of the police officer David Campbell in his arrest and charge. And that story is one I hope you can recall some of the details about. But there, one man stood his ground, and it shows the way the system is supposed to work, and it shows how the state commercial government has short-circuited constitutional government using inferior courts and making a machine run smoothly, and in its efficiency, allowing itself to heap abuse upon the people. For generations. Now, this is not something new. This is generations old. And the concurrent grand jury, in its report, you can read the whole thing, by the way, at Chattanooga.com. It is proposing reforms that are not ones that bring constitutional government closer to you, but actually make commercial government and its judicial industrial complex operate more efficiently for its own benefit. And it proposes a virtual grand jury where minor cases are done digitally, where we don't have to inconvenience the officer for a disorderly conduct charge, right? He can give his testimony from his car, right, by Skype. Let's make it so convenient that he doesn't even have to show up to harass some poor sot who's been hauled before the court. This is David Tulis, and we're thinking of individual reforms. We're thinking about the man standing in front of the row of tanks at Tiananmen Square. And the system that he has opposed is a mighty marching column. You might say lawyerly column, district attorney column, judges in that column as well, and of course the whole police state apparatus there to enforce the statute and bring us into submission, bring humility into the hearts of a once free people. That would be the Tennessean, that would be the citizen of a volunteer state. Here and the grand jury, the concurrent grand jury report is in the end, it's pro-state. It's not pro-people, and I think this is a mistake. The report should talk about we understand why it's pro-state. It talks about efficiencies and so on. This is entirely reasonable, and it's not a fault that happens, but it shows how big the state has become, how grand and sweeping its claims. And so our goal as a grand jury representing the people is to save taxpayers' dollars, right, and make the system more efficient. That's why we want to unencumber and lighten the burden on officers who are going to have to deal with people who assert their rights. And that is the reform, though. The reform that needs to be considered is not what the grand jury suggests, more efficiency by the state, having a digital grand jury, but rather having people say no, as Hanson Melvin did. The grand jury report says it cites a single local economy guide. And if you're the man in this story, I want to congratulate you, and I honor you here by mentioning you, though your name is not mentioned in this report. The story is that a single man said no. A single man demanded to be indicted by the grand jury for a seatbelt offense. He was stopped by a Tennessee Highway Patrol officer. And the grand jury report laments that 17 people were involved in the testimony directly, it says, and many more indirectly. This was an expensive proposition. And the next sentence has this report stating that the grand jury would be aided by having a virtual grand jury and not have to and it would not impact, the story says, the report says, the veracity or institution that is the American criminal justice system. This passage vaguely explains the virtues of this system, but it suggests that there are virtues, but it doesn't really explain why the virtue exists. And let me just tell you what that is. The grand jury system is a virtue in that it's a filtering system against the state. It protects the people as against the accuser. The accuser, well, like Satan in the Bible, the accuser is the state. In Christianity, Satan accuses, right? Satan accuses, and so what God says is, repent of your sins, so that you will not be accused for violating my law. And of course, God accuses sinners of violating His law, and so does Satan. Satan, though, suggests that there's no remedy, and God, when He accuses, of course, says, well, there is a remedy for those whom I accuse of violating my laws, summarized in the Ten Commandments, and that is repentance and worship of God through Jesus. That's the Christian theory, if you will. And Satan mimics that by accusing. He always accuses, and he has no remedy except defeat and humiliation, and in the end, self-murder. That's the end result of Satan's program. You kill yourself because there's no hope. You have no hope. You are in despair. That's Satan's solution for everything. You are worthless. You are nothing. You are with me. We are all sinners, and here I'm accusing you of this. I'm accusing you of that. There is no forgiveness. Just face it. There's no forgiveness. That's his argument. And the state is the same way. And in this report, we have a picture of something that I want to mention, a means of resistance which is personal. And for just to tell you how it works in other countries, I want to mention a dissenter in the Soviet Union, Vladimir Bukovsky, who was in the Soviet Gulag. And he made life miserable for the director of his camp. He knew that in the Soviet system, if you filed a complaint, it had to be strictly dealt with by every officer in the law that was required to deal with it. So what he did was become an assembly line producer of official protests, and he trained a whole army of people to disrupt the Soviet bureaucracy by logging complaints, filing complaints, and clogging the system. Eventually, there were 75,000 complaints that were written by prisoners, right? Prisoners who had a phenomenal output because they divided the labor. They had a division of labor, and each of us, he says, wrote 10 to 30 complaints a day. Composing 30 complaints in one day is not easy, so we usually divided up the subject among ourselves, and each man wrote on his own subject before handing it around for copying by all the others. And then there were 5 men in a cell. Each man takes 6 subjects, and each of them has a chance to write 30 complaints while composing only 6 himself. So you see, this is how you resist, right? You resist, and you bring down the system from the base, right? From the base, you bring it down. And he goes on. It's an incomparable description. He says, The next thing that happens is that the prison office, inundated with complaints, is unable to dispatch them within the 3-day deadline. For overrunning the deadline, they're bound to be reprimanded and to lose any bonuses they might have won. And when our war was at its hottest, the prison governor summoned every last employee to help out at the office with the work, librarians and bookkeepers, censors, political instructors, security people. And it went even further. All the students at the next door Ministry of the Interior Training College were pressed into helping us out as well. All answers to and dispatches of complaints have to be registered in a special book, right? And strict attention has to be paid in observing to correct deadlines. Since complaints follow a complex route and have to be registered every step of the way, they spawn dossiers and records of their own. And in the end, they all land in one of two places: the local prosecutor's office or the local Department of the Interior Ministry. These offices can't keep up with the flood either, and also break their deadlines, for which they too are reprimanded and lose their bonuses. The bureaucratic machine is thus obliged to work at full stretch, and you transfer the paper avalanche from one office to another, sowing panic in the ranks of the enemy. Bureaucrats are bureaucrats, Bukowski says, always at loggerheads with one another, and often enough your complaints have become weapons in internecine wars between bureaucrat and bureaucrat, department and department. This goes on for months and months. Well, there were 75,000 complaints filed altogether. Hundreds of inmates were involved dealing with the 3-day deadline. The entire bureaucratic system of the Soviet Union found itself drawn into this war, right? A war of paper. And there was no government office, no institution, no region, no republic from which we weren't getting answers, he says. Eventually, we had even drawn the criminal cons into our game, and the complaints disease began to spread throughout the prison, in which there were 1,200 men altogether. I think that if the business had continued a little longer and involved everyone in the prison, the Soviet bureaucratic machine would have simply ground to a halt. All Soviet institutions would have had to stop work and busy themselves writing replies to us. Now, what I'm proposing for Hamilton County is this: that if there be 6 churches, I would say in the black community, as it's called, say the following: any member of our church who is charged with a crime, we will counsel that man or woman to demand his right to an indictment. If everybody in these small petty cases demands an indictment, the system in the Hamilton County grand jury is going to start looking kind of tight. Right? It'll get tight. And the lower courts, the inferior courts, won't handle these cases anymore, but bold and courageous black men, encouraged by their godly ministers, are saying, we have a right to be an indictment. We're not going to dicker with the DA. Quit dickering with Neil Pinkston and his people in Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office, right? The statesman in Chattanooga. All right, hang on. This is David Tulis, and you're on the David Tulis program at Nooga Radio. What's on your mind?
I used to teach constitutional rights in the 80s. I had classes, but I said, if you're a criminal, I want you to know your rights. And I don't think criminals should be taught their rights. And I think most people arrested are probably criminals. Now, there's exceptions to rules, but these gangbangers, I mean, you don't live in the poor section, I assume, and you're not living with that poor black mom that has the 2 girls with the gangbanger out who shoots through the window. Police don't. You know how much paperwork it is to arrest someone? They don't just mean, if most cops don't arrest people just to arrest them. Chances are if you're arrested, you did something wrong. And if you don't know your rights, that's tough. So I'm going to have to disagree with you on this one, David. I don't think criminals should be taught their rights. If they don't know it, that's their problem. And I don't think the churches should help them unless they really are being abused.
Well, that's a great point, Mike, unless they're really being abused. Now, we've given extensive coverage at Nooganomics.com to 2 cases, the Gelpin case and the Melvin case, of people who live right near our radio station studio in Hickson. They were the victims of perjury. In one case, the Hansen case, the police officer was dismissed for reasons other than the ones we cited, perjury being the most grievous accusation that seems warranted in his case. And in the other case, the Gelpin case, the false testimony of the arresting officer was ignored by the grand jury that issued a no true bill. So these were people who were not criminals at all. And the Times Free Press a couple Saturdays ago had on the top of page 1 the story about Hansen Melvin, and David Campbell. And it even did us the great favor of dissecting the arrest video and showing that Hanson Melvin was entirely innocent and that Campbell violated his rights, acted without probable cause, arresting him for walking while black. Walking while black, both cases. And you, my listener, can find out about these cases only at Nooganomics.com, which has covered these tribulations of common people who just happen to be black in great detail. Making the point that Hanson Melvin was right. He said no. He was the man standing in front of the column of tanks, an innocent man. I would like to think that if in these cases the police abuse was so obvious, and the abuse of Hanson Melvin, where a gang of officers arrived at his door the moment he got out of jail to harass him, that is something that wasn't even looked at by Chief Fred Fletcher. That was done by private cell phones. It did not cross the dispatch communication system of the police. They ganged up on Hanson Melvin. About 8 or 9 officers. They knew that something had gone wrong, and they were there to intimidate him and to kind of check him out, as he says. Well, if that's happening, then we have a serious problem, and I would suggest that the abuse by police, especially of minority males, is extraordinary in Chattanooga. Even though Chattanooga is blessed by having a milder policing regime than cities in other states, for sure. To mention, well, I'm going to have to get to these other points in just a minute, but we are brought to you by Boyd Speedway. Boyd Speedway every Saturday. That's tomorrow. There'll be great doings at Boyd Speedway just south of the border. Look for the latest goings on Facebook at Boyd Speedway. Also, we're brought to you by Window Depot, Chattanooga.com. Window Depot of Chattanooga. My name is David Tulis. We cover local economy and the free market, and we make a vigorous case for reform. And I'm suggesting that the people who are accused usually are not criminals. Right? My belief is that most people are not criminals who are in the court system. They're just unfortunate. They missed a hearing. Right? They lost track of a date. They couldn't make the hearing. They couldn't pay the fine. Some of them are in debtors' prisons. A quarter of the people in the jail, Jim Hammond tells me, the sheriff in an interview, a quarter of them have mental problems. So these are the people who are the victims. They're not criminals, Mike. They have mental problems. They're unstable. They don't have good food. They live in food deserts. They don't have jobs. They don't have transportation. They're living paycheck to paycheck, if that. Some are on welfare. And so my presumption is that most policing is against innocent people, not that most policing is against criminals. That's your presupposition. And I think you are making a mistake. And this is David Tulis. Do I hear a rebuttal?
Absolutely. Just because someone's mentally ill doesn't mean that they're completely absent from any charges. I mean, if I'm mentally ill and I murder someone, I'm still guilty of murder. You know, you can't just say, well, they live in bad conditions, so they can't be held accountable for their actions. That's ridiculous.
Well, I agree. That culpability is not eliminated by the fact that you have an unstable mind or an unstable way of thinking, or that you're having panic attacks or emotional problems. I agree. Very, very few things, I would say, would obviate a criminal act if it truly is a criminal act. But many of the offenses that we have on the books are not crimes at all. They're statutory crimes, but they're not sins. They don't have a real victim, and if anything, they're offenses against custom. They're not evils in themselves. They're not male in se, to use the Latin. They are called male prohibitas. They're wrongs by prohibition. They're wrongs because someone said they're wrong, and someone said these are crimes and sins, and we're going to punish these. Well, this is David Tulis, and I do thank you for giving me just a minute of your time. We argue for loving our neighbors and buying local, and having local solutions. I think there are local solutions to ending the fear in many black homes across Chattanooga. Even though the people may have some fear from gang members, I think the fear is greater against other groups. This is David Tulis.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader. Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
3, 2, 1.
Chattanooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM's news, now.
Parents of students in McMinn County have been notified that inappropriate touching may have been going on during a field trip to Space Camp in Huntsville, Alabama. Faculty says the principal has been sent down to investigate, and the police have been notified in Huntsville. The families have opted to keep the alleged victims at Space Camp, and the alleged perpetrator has been expelled pending an investigation. All of the individuals involved are students. Gravel being kicked up by construction near the Signal Mountain Boulevard exit on US 27 has been causing some pretty serious problems for windshields of drivers. Reports of chipped windshields and cracked paint have been spreading across the area. An inmate in the Hamilton County Jail has died after what they're calling a medical emergency. He was discovered and rushed to the hospital. Jeffrey Simmons, who's 44, pronounced dead at the hospital. He was in jail on a charge of domestic assault. The sheriff's office investigating his death. Russell Stroud, Nooga Radio News, now.
In-depth traffic, news, and information. Mornings on Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
Expect a very mild start to your Friday with lots of clouds, as we'll see scattered showers and a few thunderstorms march in from the west. They could be locally strong, highs into the mid and upper 70s tonight. Lingering showers will diminish after midnight, lows upper 50s with drier and pleasant weather for the weekend. Get to JCPenney's biggest sale of the season, just in time for Mother's Day. Now through Sunday, get up to 50% off throughout the store. That's getting your pennies worth now at your local JCPenney. And I'm Swarsheen 12 Chief Meteorologist Patrick Ward.
On Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
I have the best steak selection in town. Name of the business is Don's Meat Shop, and I'm Donnie Raines. Just ask for Donnie. I make over 20 different types of sausages. Most of them are great for grilling. We have the best selection, best quality. We have the hard-to-find items. Don's Meat Shop.
Window Depot of Chattanooga. They're locally owned and operated and been around since 2008. Installing top-quality vinyl replacement windows. You get the best price and service in the area. Top quality double pane, energy efficient windows. They look great and save you money.
Oh, I love to save money.
You'll also save money on your heat and cooling costs. Call 894-0011. 894-0011. WindowDepotChattanooga.com. WindowDepotChattanooga.com. Sales and installation professionals. You'll get a fantastic job while helping to enhance the value, appearance, comfort, and efficiency of your most valuable asset, your home. Other window providers? No way. Window Depot Chattanooga's windows qualify for the TVA rebate. Sliding doors, gutters, soffits, fascia, garage doors, and other home improvements. If you want to save a ton, call 894-0011. WindowDepotChattanooga.com. WindowDepotChattanooga.com. Window Depot of Chattanooga. Sales and installation professionals.
And now to our reporter in the field.
We asked Ray at Ray's Plumbing what's important for homeowners to know.
Some fill lines, 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 some fill line systems can cost upwards of $10,000. The bottom line is to save yourself money down the road. I would definitely recommend everybody with a septic that is not on county or city sewer to have an inspection done by a qualified professional. It'd be great if nobody did inspections on them for all plumbing companies. That's what we do to make a living. Not to scare anyone, but it should be in the back of your mind. The danger is the field lines failing and costing thousands upon thousands of dollars and tearing your yard up. By preventative maintenance, you're saving yourself a large headache that may displace yourself and your family. That happens more often than you think. The waste is designed to stay in the tank, and that waste will build up over time. Even with treatment, we have to help that waste break down. Ultimately, preventative maintenance is the key that will keep you from spending $5,000 to $10,000 on replacing your septic system. The bottom line is to save yourself money down the road.
Call Ray at Ray's Plumbing, 421-6341, 421-6341.
Competent, kind, caring, knowledgeable, experienced, great listener, great negotiator, in touch, accessible. If these are the characteristics you want and need in a realtor, you want and need Thomas DeMoss of Keller Williams Realty. Thomas is a very gifted realtor who puts the client's needs first. Whether you're buying or selling a home, Thomas is the realtor of choice. Thomas will help and guide you through each step of this very important process. For many of us, the purchase of a home is one of our largest investments and most important family and financial decision. Let Thomas use his 10 years of experience in the Chattanooga real estate market to give you the advantage you need when buying or selling a home. Buying a house? Thomas can help you navigate the emotional and somewhat anxious process of buying a home. For those of you who want to sell a house, Thomas uses his marketing and negotiating experience to help you sell your home for top dollar. Thomas is a local resident, raising his family here in Hamilton County. He knows the area very well. For many agents, real estate is a job. With Thomas DeMoss, it's a passion and what he loves to do. Call Thomas today for a no-obligation consultation. He makes the process as simple as possible. Call 423-364-0028 and visit his website, northriverpropertygroup.com.
Need a tiller to get things going for the spring? Spiff up your porch, maybe your deck? Come on by and get a pressure washer at Action Rental. Family in town, need some tables and chairs for an event? Come on by and see us, Action Rental. This is Dan at Action Rental on Lee Highway. Come by and see me. Action Rentals.
Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM knows your opinion is important. So call 800-8949. Agree or disagree. Call 423-800-8949. 800-8949. Nooga Radio, AM 1240, 92.7 FM, and 95.3 HD4. News, talk, sports. Nooga Radio. Now, the smartest guy with a bow tie in Chattanooga, Tennessee, David Tulis.
It is Friday, and if you want to give me a call, it's 800-8949, 800-8949. We're talking about the concurrent grand jury report, and it makes a very important argument, even though the grand jury is arguing the wrong direction. The very fact that it's making the argument shows us the nature of the problem that has beset Hamilton County, that has beset Chattanooga, and probably affected you, my listener, in your business and in your family. The headline at Chattanooga.com, where you can find the whole of the report printed out, if you will, is concurrent grand jury says law needs to be changed so grand juries deal with serious felony cases. Now that right there, you might think that that's just kind of obscure and maybe a little boring, but I think that we can have a much more cheerful and brighter city where people are optimistic, where the entrepreneurial spirit can be let loose, where self-confidence can be untrammeled, where personal safety as against the state making claims against you is more secure, and where there's more peace and more prosperity. That the view that I'm coming from, of course, is the ideal espoused in Christianity, where you have a horizontal society and there are courts to defend contract and defend the rights of life and property. And we don't have a superstructure over us that's called the modern state, right? The modern surveillance, welfare, warfare, and tax state. That state is greatly diminished as Christianity continues its profound work across the centuries in the hearts of mankind and in mankind's cultures. That's the general promise is that there will be a rise in self-government among individuals worldwide through time, and that before Christ's returns, there will be a general pacification, a general victory from judgment to grace, if you will. That is the course of history, from judgment or out of judgment to grace. That's the course of human history, and it shows the salting effects of the gospel and the work of Jesus Christ, who was God and man in one person, who lived and died a couple thousand years ago in what is now modern Israel, the modern state of Israel, and his work and the power of his Spirit, the Holy Spirit, across mankind, proceeding from the Father. Creates new cultures, a new man, if you will, and that is by personal regeneration, one soul at a time. And the result of that personal regeneration, the Gospels teach one person at a time, brings about societal reform at every point: reform in government, reform in courts, reform in finances, reform in agriculture, reform in warfare. Right, all these things that are marred by the fall. Are reformed over time in terms of God's commands, right? In terms of the Ten Commandments, which is a summary of all of God's claims upon mankind and his directives for mankind, given to man for man's benefit and for God's glory. That's why we have God's law. And that, of course, is that law system is the governing system today. And whatever our statutes may say, whatever our governors, whatever our presidents may declare, and whatever they may do, the real law is God's. And so that's a great source of comfort and encouragement, I think, for many people, even people who aren't Christians, but who borrow from the ideas of Christianity. That's a very encouraging idea. My name is David Tulis, and we're here at AM 1240, FM 92.7. The number is 800-8949, 800-8949. If you want to get in here on my last minute on the show. this week. The idea of the grand jury report is important, and here's the issue that it looks at. It's proposing a remedy to support a system which has already taken a shortcut to build itself to its great size. Okay, the shortcut, the modern state, the modern commercial government has grown. Its policing, its courts have grown. Though sin has not grown, though crime has not grown, that machine, the judicial industrial complex in Hamilton County in the state of Tennessee, has grown hugely over the decades since the war to prevent Southern independence, when many expansion of the state really began, and so because we have lesser courts that take the pressure off real courts, we have the police state. It is allowed to function because these lesser courts are the place where plea bargains are made, where the mill runs smoothly in great volume. Right, the cattle. People are turned into cattle, and they're rushed through, and most people, 90% of the people plead guilty, 9 out of 10, and the system is fed. The victims are numbered and tattooed and fined, and they are part of the system now, right? They're kind of wards of the state. All damaged. Everybody whom the court touches is damaged for life. They're damaged for life unless they can expunge their guilty plea or their offense. And the concurrent grand jury report proposes not reducing the efficiency to make it more just, but increasing the efficiency to allow the injustice of commercial government against the common person to flow more readily, right? And the idea is of a virtual grand jury where all the small cases go without having to inconvenience the officer. And it tells of one man who said no, one man who stood his ground, as Hanson Melvin did, the black walking while black victim of the police department. He was finally freed from the false claims against him. But one man charged by the Tennessee Highway Patrol of riding without a seatbelt, his saying no claimed the time of more than 17 people involved in testimony directly and many more indirectly, the report says. That's the key fact. And that means that it's inconvenient for someone to stand his ground. It's inconvenient for a person to say, no, indict me, right? To say I want to be indicted on a disorderly conduct charge is to throw a monkey wrench into the system. Think if 5 people said that. 5 people want to have a jury trial on disorderly conduct, right, which is the throwaway charge. There are many other throwaway charges that are kind of harassing charges that the state files through its agents against the citizenry. People who have not sinned or done anything really criminal or wrong, but they're still dragged into the system, right? Their paperwork is out of order, right? Your papers are not in order, sir. So therefore, you are a criminal, and we're going to harass you. The lower courts allow for there not to have to be the bulky and troubling and politically disastrous necessity of arresting every person charged, booking that person, fingerprinting him, getting his data down, putting him in jail, forcing him to pay bond, and then indicting him, right? If you're a real criminal, that's what should happen to you. But because we have all these sort of pseudo criminals, they are just let in by citation. And so the citation process is a convenience, allowing the system to go at very high speed with large volumes of people. And now the concurrent grand jury wants there to be even more of a convenience, and that would be the virtual grand jury. And I would say that an interest in justice in favor of the common man and against the state, right? If you have an interest in justice, you are going to be against what the state's doing and against what the state interest, the progressive interest, is doing. You think that I'm making this up. You think that I'm making laughable statements. Well, look at the Times Free Press today for a story that suggests how bad things have become. How much against free markets, how much against local economy people are. They're against it because they are suspicious of common people. In South Pittsburgh, there's a part of town that's largely black, and it's a neighborhood around Moore Park along First Street. And there was in April, on April the 29th of that month, there have been an organized gathering at the park with free food and music going along parallel to the annual Cornbread Festival in South Pittsburgh. Well, this last time, there were people. They happened to be black, but they were people, and they were blocking the road. And they were, then they were ordered to disperse. Right, y'all clear out. First Street impassable, and so the police, serving the executive branch of that city, ordered them off. Some refused, and then they began yelling at officers, calling them names and so on. Well, the city called the city government, the police department, called for help. All right. Well, the state patrol came, and here's how they came. You're gonna love this. You're just gonna love this. How they didn't come in civilian garb or anything. They came ready for warfare. A strike team, South Pittsburgh, here to support outmanned officials. That's the outmanned officials is the term used by the Times Free Press. There's a man named Walker who's quoted, Jackie Walker, resident. I look out and see something that reminded me of Martin Luther King's march in Selma, Alabama. I see about 50 policemen marching up the road and a paddy wagon behind them. This is a woman, Jackie's woman. She said the city's actions made its officials look like fools. There's another person quoted, Walter Officer, residing in South Pittsburgh, said he'd never seen anything like troops that were called in to disperse the crowd. He said rumors surfaced that gang members were at the Moore Park party, and that's why police were called. But he questioned how any city officials would know who is or who is not a gang member. As far as I'm concerned, he tells the Times Free Press in today's edition, by the way, go online to look at that. You could all be sitting there as Klansmen. Officer told the members of the all-white city commission nobody was doing anything. It was a peaceful event. Nothing was found afterwards, he said, except, quote, trash bags and a clean park. You're sitting on a powder keg and it's about to explode, this man told the town commission. And then you'll sit back and wonder why this went on. Well, you see what's happening here is there's a police solutions for everything, right? And this has gotten so bad that Chattanooga Police Department and Fred Fletcher always thinking in small scale, right? Fred Fletcher and Mayor Andy Burke, his boss, think in tiny steps. They don't think of reform. There's no reform in view with Andy Burke, and you can thank the voters of Chattanooga who believed all the Burkean propaganda on Facebook, right? The digital hordes swept Facebook, swept digital media. It was so powerful in digital presence that when you Googled Dave Crockett, the first link was Andy Burke's website, right? So he had figured it all out. So if you Googled the most important opponent, right, the Nooga-centric candidate, Dave Crockett, you came up to Andy Burke's holy and devout website. In the Times Free Press story today, Mayor Virgil Holder is quoted saying he was called at home by black and white citizens alike, complaining that they couldn't access First Street and that they did not feel safe there that night. I did support what took place, he said. Nobody was arrested. Nobody got hurt. If we had sat back and done nothing, somebody would have gotten hurt, he said. Well, another person quoted, Raven Robinson. She was at that event on April 29. She said she loves her hometown but hates what's going on. Quote, the African-American section was targeted when there wasn't much going on, and it was peaceful. That doesn't send a good message. Black people are viewed suspiciously in many places, and because we have law enforcement, we have 1,000 Americans killed every year by blast of gunfire. There's a story out of Denver involving a terrifying picture of a black man and an officer. You can see his wristwatch and his little tag on his arm and his gun in his hand, aiming his gun with a light on it at a man through an open car door. The man in the car is Deion Jones, and he is in Denver. And there's a kind of a senseless escalation in this encounter. After approaching Jones, who was seated in his vehicle minding his own business, not committing any crimes, the police did something the average citizen cannot do. They drew their weapons and pointed at this man. On the radios, they had said, he doesn't belong here. He was a man from out of town, and he was black, right? So that means he's there for bad things. The officer, he began ordering Jones to get out of the vehicle, something he said he would not do because they had no probable cause. And he also feared for his safety, rightfully so. Now, here's a man who's standing his ground. One officer even threatened to shoot and possibly kill Jones. He said, if you put your hand down there, I will shoot you. And they kidnapped this man and put him in the cage. No probable cause. They searched his car without permission. They found some cocaine, and those charges were dismissed. Mr. Jones engaged an attorney, David Lane. My initial reaction when I first saw the video is, this guy is lucky to be alive, he told reporters. Jones agreed. I was like, man, are they going to kill me just because I don't get out of the vehicle? He told reporters he refused to get out of the vehicle because he said he'd done nothing wrong, nothing to warrant a search and a seizure. Lane, the attorney, says police have a pack mentality. Once someone questions police authority, the chase is on. It's like a pack dog mentality that the police have. And we can see that in operation in another story. This is David Tulis. I do thank you for calling me here at...
Liberals and Democrats are enablers, like Johnson. Keep making excuses for the behavior of the drug addicts and blacks in the community that, especially in Chattanooga, that are killing their own, in their own black community, as they call it. Keep making excuses because it's going to continue. Look in Baltimore. The police in Baltimore have decided they're not going to make arrests. And look at Chicago, where the gangs are killing each other. Hey, how are you blaming the police for this? When you're raised without a dad because of liberalism, because, oh, that's okay, it's the bad police. The police aren't the problem, David. The police, the problem is you have a wussy mayor with a wussy chief of police that's not stopping and frisking and busting heads and saying, you will act civilized, you will not shoot each other, and disarm them. That's the problem. The problem is liberalism, and it's going to get worse. The police
Why is
aren't
it getting
the
worse?
problem.
We have President Trump at
Needs
the
a
helm.
headache. Where am I wrong?
Okay, the caller says that what we need to have is police that exercise their authority more generously, more generously for themselves. They need to bust heads effectively and stop and frisk. A backer of the stop and frisk policy that was forbidden finally in New York, where innocent people were harassed and searched by the tens of thousands by the NYPD. Well, I understand how it seems that I'm viewed as a liberal. I'm not a liberal, except in the sense of being a classical liberal. And a classical liberal is someone who believes in liberty, who is not in favor of progressive liberalism, which is to say statist-oriented liberalism, pro-state, pro-government, effectively pro-police and not pro-citizen. We have an armed citizenry in Chattanooga and Hamilton County. There are thousands and thousands of men and women who bear arms. Some have licenses to do so, and they are there ready to defend themselves, ready to defend women and children. If there's a mass shooting or a massacre underway, you can be sure that an armed citizen will be nearby, and if he's a cautious person, he will aid the innocent and stop the killer. And that the local economy argument sees personal safety and public safety as belonging to the citizenry, not to the state. And that's why, since we do favor that, we would strongly argue here on the David Tulis program in favor of the sheriff handling all security, the sheriff's department run by Jim Hammond in Hamilton County, all security. And if there is to be law enforcement, that it be by the sheriff's department. There's a story out of Weirton, West Virginia, where the steel mill is, and a man named Ronald Williams, who was having a mental breakdown. He was approached by Officer Stephen Mader, who did the right thing. Stephen Mader said, he said, I told him, put down the gun. And he's like, shoot me. And I told him, I'm not going to shoot you, brother. And then he starts flicking his wrist at me to get me to react to it. And this is quoting the officer. I thought I was going to be able to walk up to him and de-escalate it. I knew it was a suicide by cop situation. He wasn't screaming, yelling. He wasn't angry. He just seemed distraught. And so he tries to negotiate with this man to get him to put his gun down. Well, backup arrives, and another officer immediately shoots and kills Ronald E. Williams, 23, in a flash. And Officer Mader is fired. He's fired for showing restraint The other officer who slays Williams cleared of all wrongdoings, showing that that department favors what we would have to call an indiscriminate killing. Again, that's a white officer, and the man who's slain in his suicide sense, slain. And there's a story also of the wife calling 911 for medical help out of Galveston. Cops come, but instead of helping, they kill this man. 9 Galveston sheriff's deputies arrive, and Mr. Zamora, his name is Geronimo Zamora, behavior erratic, sweating profusely, combative, and he began fighting with police. And while there is a dash cam video, there's none from the deputies who wore their cameras. Randall Kalinin, who is the family's attorney, wants to know why none of the officers had physical injuries, if that indeed was why they killed this man. We have people who are having episodes, and they are distraught. They need to be given time and space. That requires patience. That requires a great signal claim, a great benefit, a great method, if you will, here in local economy. And that is conversation. We figure it out. If there's someone who's about to kill himself, we don't rush in and kill him. We don't oblige him. If we're officers, we're there to preserve life. Officers have a call to preserve innocent life. If a man has not done anything worthy of capital punishment, then woe be it that a city employee fires a gun and kills him because that city employee has laid down a line in the sand or made an ultimatum. Ultimatums have no place in a situation like that, where a quarter of the inmates in the Hamilton County Jail have mental problems. We need to work on that problem. This is David Tulis.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader. Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
When my brother and I opened our first Jets Pizza, we believed if we made the best pizza, customers would find us. So we made fresh dough each day, used fresh toppings, and premium mozzarella cheese. 300-plus stores later, we still do.
Try Jet's famous 8-corner pizza with premium mozzarella cheese and 1 topping, now just $11.99 for a limited time only. Jet's Pizza, the best pizza in town. 3600 Hickson Pike.
Life is short. Eat better pizza.
Let's get Jets.
He stole out so much cash, such a huge mountain of cash, that he's become a national star. Rick Davis. You know the story. Cash, 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 and more cash. People can't believe it. They want to see it. And now Rick Davis has a new TV show. National TV, USA and Canada. He's got the gold and silver, diamonds and rings. You get dizzy just thinking about it. Rick's selling. Rick's buying. Cash, 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 and more cash. And now a mountain of cash catching the Hollywood spotlight. You know where it is. Brainerd Road. Rick Davis, Gold and Diamonds. Cash, 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 and national TV cash. That's really big. Everyone wants to see it. Money flying out the door. Rick Davis is America's jeweler. It's better than Hollywood. It's right here. Cash, 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 and more cash. Rick Davis, Gold and Diamonds. Brainerd Road.
You love me. You really love me.
I've been a customer at S&S 14 years. It's way out of my way, but I'm well treated. I believe what I'm told. Price is reasonable. David Tulis here. Make an S&S appointment today. This week, get $50 off any 30,000-mile service or timing belt repair. And get a free combat knife as a gift. S&S Auto Repair specializes in Toyota, Lexus, Honda, Acura, Scion, Nissan, and Infiniti. 6-time winner of Best of the Best award in the Times Free Press. 855-3436. ssautorepair.net. 855-3436.
Need windows? Hey folks, do you need new windows? Good news. Window Depot of Chattanooga has a great special going on right now. 10 high-quality, energy-efficient double-hung vinyl windows installed for only $29.90. That's right, 10 double-hung vinyl windows, only $2,990. And yes, they qualify for the TBA rebates. Call 894-0011. Window Depot of Chattanooga today, located at 5950 Shaliford Road. Call 894-0011 today.
What kind of name is Herb Garanzi? Anyway, Herb builds storage sheds. He's an Appleton, you can call it. His sheds are cheaper than other people's. And the surprise is, when you go and look at them online or in person, they're sturdier than the other guys. Local economy at its best. Not shipped in from a factory in Minnesota or somewhere. Herb delivers. He'll set it up for free. Up to 12 by 24, starting at $900. blue, green, yellow, you name it. Pick a metal or shingle roof, and metal corners are standard. Make a Herb's Yard Barn bump resistant. The skids underneath, not 4x4, but 4x6, 6x6. On top of that, inside, extra beams for sturdier construction. Appison 503-3741. Appison 503-3741. On the keyboard, herbsyardbarns.com. herbsyardbarns.com. Your marriage is over. You've been abandoned, betrayed. You're angry, shattered, and heartbroken. Don't go it alone. When you are facing divorce, you need an experienced advocate to help protect your rights in future. And you need it from a man with a sympathetic heart, but a hard nose. Attorney Clay Whitaker will fight for you in this most confusing and bitter time in your life. Clay Whitaker, 756-6400.
It is Eric Jones hard into the outside wall, and they are still 3 and 4 wide. It looks like we're racing at Talladega.
Caution flag is out. It looked like Denny Hamlin was trying to get by Ricky Stenhouse. Got into the back of Ricky at the line. Man, that's a close one. Matt Kenseth wins stage 1.
Green checkered flag is out, and Brad Keselowski has won stage 2.
Dale Earnhardt Jr. into the wall. That will bring out the caution. Caution waving once again. And again, it's Dale Earnhardt Jr. involved.
Oh, trouble. Ty Dillon has gotten turned to the inside of the racetrack.